morning, good afternoon, good evening. Um, as I've seen some of the sign-ups, we're kind of spanning across APAC and EMEA. So I hope you've got your wine, you've got your coffee, you've got your tea, whatever you need to keep you going. But I am so excited. I feel like Brie and I are back together again. For those of you who've known, Brie and I have worked together in the employer branding industry. It must be 10 years we first met each other. And in many ways, she is, well, actually, in all ways, she is where I am today. So I feel like it's serendipity that we are here together today to host Elevate Your Employer Brand with Strategic KPIs. So in case you don't know, my name's Elle Green. I am VP of Strategic Partnerships and Community at the Martech Employer Brand Wagon. And the wonderful Brie Mason, who helped put together, was instrumental in putting this guide together. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Brie.
Hi guys, I am here down here in Australia, employer brand consultant. I've been working in this space now for over 18 years, mainly focused on the APAC region, working within creative agencies, RPO, and in-house in building a global employer brand team. But last 4.5 years odd, I run my own employer brand consultancy, so working with some nice lovely global and local brands. In all facets of employer brand, but particularly the strategy side of things. And do a lot of work with the guys at the Martech, who I love very much.
No, the feeling is absolutely mutual. So just a bit of housekeeping first, obviously. So we want to talk a bit around why KPIs are important for employer brand and talent acquisition. It's so hard, like there's so many KPIs, what's relevant to you as an organization. So how to sort of step back. This guide should help you think. We are not being prescriptive. We want to give you some, stats, some ideas, how you can apply them to your organization, and then some real sort of tangible techniques. And then at the end of this, obviously, we are going to give all of this goodness away. Some KPI planners, some strategy guides, and the resources. So what that means is you can actually listen. I would get your creative juices going, take down what's important, but you will get everything sent out to you. The other thing is, if you do have questions, please post them. We have lots of time allocated at the end of this for answering your burning questions. And Brie and I will have fisticuffs over who answers them. No, I'm going to probably hand over to Brie. Brie's the one person in the world who can probably make me not talk as much or get as excited as I might normally do. I think it's almost an excite-off between the two of us.
Yes.
But, we'll really be deep diving, in essence, into how you can elevate your employer brand using, strategic KPIs. Before we launch into the full strategy guide we've put together for you, we'll explore the importance of creating and measuring KPIs for employer brand, because as we know, without knowing the why behind your KPIs, and we're often just chucked KPIs, you won't be able to choose the right KPIs to achieve success. So we've shared insights from the KPI to support you in choosing, as I said, which KPIs to select, how to measure them, and then we'll take a sneak peek into the guide and then discuss how you can strategically tackle the top 3 KPIs chosen by over 500 employer branding, talent acquisition, and talent brand leaders in our amazing community. Brie and I had a wonderful day together as well, with lots of flavored soda water and coffee to put together some comprehensive Notion pages that you can actually then take away, duplicate, and implement immediately to see, some hopefully instant results. So to kickstart the discussion, Brie, can you tell me why you feel setting and measuring KPIs is so important for an employer brand strategy?
Where do you start, Elle? Look, the strongest employer brands are often driven by data. So it's really hard to be successful if you don't have insight into your brand's efficiency, the impact that you're having, and importantly, the areas that you need improvement. So by consistently monitoring your data and metrics, you can really start tracking the commercial value that your employer bringing to your organization. And that's something that's really important in the current business economy. I'm hearing we've had a lot of peers who have lost their roles or their teams and just needing to continually prove value. I think that's really important. If we're wanting to continue to get, I think about how you're growing and building teams and support for the work, obviously you need to be proving that success. That's definitely something I learned after 10 odd years in-house role, to go from building a team being one person to end up being 8, looking after I guess a global organization with some really nice budget. The only way to do that is to be able to track and showcase and share the value that you're providing the organization for that work you're doing. But there are other reasons. There are obviously other reasons as well, obviously, to track the progress of your efforts. You need to be understanding whether you're having an impact where it matters the most. I think social media impressions, click-through rates, that's nice, but
vanity metrics.
Like, so what? Who cares? And I think a lot of leaders of the organization don't really care either. So we need to think about how we're really helping the organization where it matters most. How we're justifying our reason for being within an organization.
Yep.
We need to know which specific strategies are working, which ones aren't working, to really, I think about how we're improving our employee value proposition, or thinking about our go-to-market approach over a period of time. And only, I guess, being able to track your KPIs and data is only way of knowing how successful that's been. Getting your KPIs right and setting yourself and the team up for success is really important. So yeah, just a few things.
No, look, I totally agree that properly identifying and understanding your KPIs can help you better measure how your employer brand is performing. And it's interesting when you're talking about as we call them, the vanity metrics. Interestingly, I find they're somewhat nebulous and they don't necessarily mean anything, but actually they still mean something to some people. People are still using them for measurement, but that doesn't work in the longer term because it's not real ROI. It's like the so what behind that. So I think, having really strong KPIs can help you stay focused and on track, but obviously monitor your progress and gauge success that helps you then iterate and understand where you can deploy your resources, invest in your employer brand more strategically, over-index here, perhaps, and pivot. Oh my God, I can't believe I just said that so early on, but I think being able to pivot is so important in the in the economy we exist in right now, and then being able to communicate your strategy with your stakeholders, saying this is why we're doing it based on data, this is why we're doing it this way, and then again, as you said, to be able to justify your budgets and investments. And I think I can't remember, so I don't know if Claire or Alex are on this call, but and that they helped us put together this guide as well together. And I wanted to call it KPI should be an employer brand best friend, because get them right. And I think it can, really set up our employer brand strategies for success.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this leads us, fancy that, quite nicely into the research that the Martech has been doing over the last 8 months. They've collected over 549 unique data points from employer brand and talent acquisition leaders globally from organizations with an average of 65,000 employees. And so I say strong leaders in our market, I mean that have multiple priorities and actually have to focus on what actually moves the needle for them. So, I'm sure you've all got things ticking in your own brains looking at this, but I would love for us just to pick 1 or 2 things worth highlighting before jumping into the content planners, if that's okay. So what stands out to you, Brie, most in these KPIs?
I think I need a bigger screen.
Sorry, just saying, guys, I'm not at home in the UK, and Brie's not in her normal office. So we're both working off really small Macs today. We thought the irony that we both are. Can you see them?
Look, I think what I didn't expect, but I think what's particularly heartening is the inclusion of employee retention as a KPI by both, I guess, TA and
At
EB leaders.
last.
Yes, right. I think this really reflects the evolution of both talent acquisition. So I guess and being less about putting bums on seats and more focus on talent strategy. So really, how organisations are building out their buy, build, borrow, bot strategies. I think it also highlights the value of a holistic employer brand that cuts right across the employee life cycle, extending beyond mere attraction to, I guess, also thinking about how we're fostering employee engagement and retention. So that's really awesome to see that that's obviously being more widely adopted. I know it's been spoken about for a good 10 plus years, but seeing organisations put that into practice and holding EB leaders accountable for it is really awesome.
And I think that works with, as we see, EB employee experience often being tied more and
Mm,
more closely together.
absolutely. I think some other distinctions, I think in the top 6 that I notice, I think about some of the top 6 compared to some of the KPIs a bit lower down. The higher ones seem to be less tactical. So I think that they are more strategic and foundational compared to some of the tactical KPIs that kind of focus on the specifics of the recruitment process. So obviously, some of the more traditional recruitment marketing metrics like time and or cost to hire, conversion rate. So I think whereas other ones are more about your brand and that bigger picture. So
Brie,
that's interesting.
do you think, and that's because I know we've said this a lot, but because the ones lower down tend to be tied to individual stakeholders like talent acquisition or whoever owns the career site, whereas this is super reflective of the fact that employer brand tends to have an influence over all of that, right?
Yeah, yeah, it does. I think it's I think comes down to what I've seen as well is the maturity of the organization and where they're at as well. I
Yeah.
know 10 plus years ago, yeah, I was focused on the recruitment market metrics because that's what you're brought in to do. It was around how do you solve the immediate problems, and that's where your focus was. And I remember as I
Silver
was,
bullet.
yeah, and I remember as I was maturing, and it's
Mm.
kind of that thing where you're trying to prove that you can add more value, but at the same time I remember getting quite scared of going, okay, I know I can influence these things across the employee life cycle. I know I can help influence engagement and retention, but to put my name against it as a KPI scared the shit out of me. Like, I'm not
Which probably
solely
resonates with
accountable.
so many people.
Like,
Yeah.
that's not totally in my control. There's obviously so many other factors that
Yeah.
influence that. So I found it hard to be held accountable for that. But I think, as you see, that was many years ago, and I think the maturity of that, and you can see, I think when you truly do have more impact rather than just some of those
Yeah.
more traditional marketing type activities, you can
Yeah.
become now more accountable. As you mentioned, roles are cutting across employee experience as well as just the kind of the marketing brand management side of it. I think as well, the metrics are quite broad and have a broader, I think, as following along, like I was just mentioning, having broader implications for the company's brand and culture. So like diversity is in here as well. So that's just obviously not just about hiring; it's reflecting the broader company culture and the values of the organisation there as well.
I'm so pleased to
Um,
see that. So pleased.
yeah, yes. So again, I remember I was accountable for bringing in women. That was one of the key audiences that we're focused on,
I remember
right?
working with you on it 10 years ago. I think was it or eight or 10 years ago, which seems crazy. We're still trying to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and I think there's a really nice mix of qualitative and quantitative aspects here. So I'm kind of looking up and down again. I think while some of the metrics like career site traffic can be quite obviously quantitative, there's others like obviously talent brand or employee content, which have more qualitative aspects that really require more kind of in-depth analysis to measure effectively, or it's a bit more complex to how we
Yeah.
go about measuring those as well. So they're just a few observations.
Oh, lovely. Thank you,
Hmm.
Brie. I mean, as always, I mean, and that was really only a tiny snapshot of the data that you'll find in the Martech's KPI guide. And we're actually, for those of you who are awake, we'll be running a session deep diving into the guide in more detail later today, I think in about 6 hours, if anyone's got confused why there's 2 out there. But for this session, we're going to be focusing on 3 tangible strategic plans that you can use to immediately improve, measure, and share your KPIs. And as I said earlier, when choosing your KPIs, really revise selecting one or two that align most effectively with your organizational goals, so that you know from the get-go that you can create value, and then sort of embark on your journey from there, engaging with key stakeholders along the way. While our guides are not exhaustive, well, exhausted too, maybe. we hope. Sorry, for those of you who didn't see me last week, I'm also on the back of World Employer Brand Day in Amsterdam. So hello to any of you who I saw last week. But saying about the guide, I really hope they serve as a springboard for your sort of KPI achievements. So if we jump right through to sort of the number one KPI about improving your career site traffic. When I first saw this, I have to admit I was kind of quite surprised. We're talking a lot about the environment we're in, economic environment we're in, is a lot of org restructures, layoffs, people aren't hiring. So I think this is so telling that actually organizations are still, and this is over the last 8 months, remember, so really in the midst of where we are now. So I think, the fact that people still know they need to hire, or at least they need to talent pool and engage. So I think if we double down on that, and you're trying to still convince your organization in these times that you actually need to improve your career site, I think, why is that? Well, we know that career site pages bring in 13% of applicants, but 24% of hires, meaning that career site applicants are 3.5 times more likely to be hired versus job board applicants, if you're looking at your spend. And in fact, organic growth can reduce the reliance on paid job boards or recruitment agencies by 20%. So when you're looking at cost controls, that's, really strong stats for you there. By driving traffic to your career site page, you're able to directly control the candidate experience and brand story. And I said those two words on purpose: candidate experience and brand story. So Brie, what would you say is the top advice that you would give to someone who's looking to improve their career site?
Look, I think I agree, Elle, that obviously a frequented and one where people are spending more time on, I guess, website gives your employer brand much more time to shine. I guess there's no point. I see so many organizations, obviously I help so many organizations in uncovering, defining and building out their EVP and their employer brand positioning. And often it can stop there. So there's no point doing all that if no one can actually see it, right? So I think obviously this metric makes sense. I think your careers website is that main tool. It's the one place, it's the center of your usually go-to-market strategy. Anything external, obviously, you need to drive people somewhere. And this is the main place to really convince and convert interest into applicants. So making sure that you're getting the right people to your website, and to make sure that site's working effectively for you is a key one. So I guess my recommendation would be to, I think, audit yourself regularly.
Yes.
And it seems crazy, but I reckon every client I start
Who has
working
the
with,
time to do it?
oh, it's true, right? That's true. But most clients I work with, they say, oh, yeah, don't look at our careers website. We haven't touched that for years. And I'm like,
so true.
Don't look at my career site. I'm like, well, what do you think your candidates are looking at?
Well, everyone's looking at your career
just ignore it.
I know.
This is crazy, guys. This is the main place they're going to. I'm literally talking to a large financial organization today, and I'm like, I said, the reality is, and we're just about to launch tomorrow a new site, and I was like, you realize, any smart candidate, any professional, and consider you're in professional industry here, everyone's going to your site. So the fact you've just ignored it for so many years, and it's literally at least 5 or 6 years since it hasn't been touched with content, and it had nothing on there, and it was a horrible experience. So what do you think impact that's had for the last 5 or 6 years on your employer brand, or how many people who may not have then continued that process? I was quite gobsmacked, to be honest, the conversation we were having. But look, they are well aware of that, but I think it comes down to capacity and focus, right? It's exactly the point. We've got time, right?
Coming back to this guide, this is why we want to give the stats to help people go back to the business and say, this is why we need to do it.
We need to build a case. And that was literally where they're at. And we helped build that case. And we've got up an MVP version, and it's thinking about then how do we take it to that next level, right? And that's that. I think it's in that continually to audit and be looking at yourself and looking at your competitors, I think, as well. And look, well, if that's what candidates are doing, right, how is our site comparing to others? So it's not thinking about, I guess, from an SEO perspective. I think it's auditing, kind of looking at what content you got on there. Does it answer all the key questions that talent would have? How impactful is that site being? So by looking at your analytics, you can see which pages are most read, which pages are driving the greatest conversions. Making sure the site's obviously mobile and accessibly friendly. I think it's really important, but ensuring it's a really true representation of your brand and your, I guess, EVP. Is it obviously up to date and really telling your real authentic story, I think is really important. Just making sure that if a candidate visits your site, they're going to form an accurate impression of what it's like to work for you, for your organization. Make sure you're giving them the answers they need in order to make an informed decision on whether you're the right organization for them or not. I don't think there's such thing as too much website information on a careers website. Like, sorry, said no one ever. I've learned too much about that company. I'm about to make this biggest commitment to in my life. Obviously
But
more
it's
than less.
relevant. It's
Obviously
relevant
relevant,
information.
right?
That's the key
Also,
bit. Like, no noise. We haven't got time for noise, but if it's relevant to them, to their experience.
exactly. Obviously a poor site, average or no content, which I see quite often, and a poor experience obviously creates a bad impression, bad experience, and obviously could be a poor perception of your organization and obviously your employer brand. So just, I think, a few key things I think to keep in mind to improve your site.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'm a massive advocate of, employee content. I've spent years and I'm so happy to see where we are now that, uh, you know, we are in a place where employee content is becoming more the norm, so less of the glossy, non-relevant content, because it's really the top way to drive traffic to your career site. So by posting content to your social channels, call to action to your career page, you can drive a significant amount of organic, direct traffic. And employee posts are found to be 10 times more engaging than the company branded posts. And I'm really thankful that organizations are starting to see this and acknowledge this. And additionally, employee content can also increase the time spent on the site. As I was saying earlier about that relevance, because as this slide shows, almost all our top EB and TA leaders we polled strongly agreed that employee content is needed to increase applications on your career site. And, I dropped words, candidate experience, personalization, but relevance as well. So, for me, I recommend regularly updating the career page with engaging content about company culture, culture more than ever, employee testimonials, and things like a day in a life stories. And I don't necessarily mean bring your pet to work day. There's a time and place for that, but there is a time and place for that. But thinking about, whether you're working on tech stats, if you're in R&D, if you're in fulfillment or retail, but really helping your employees tell the story and the experience that a potential candidate or internal talent would experience there. And, you can use employee video tools to gather these scale. I was literally having a conversation with somebody just before this, and they're doing this whole event next year with thousands of employees. And I was like, great, there's a tool for that. So I get really excited by that. Anyway, I won't digress too much.
Just on that, Elle, actually, saying
yeah.
sorry, day in the life. Today, I'm deep in some research for an aged care organisation, and 6 different conversations with new starters, people earlier in their careers, around kind of what would they have liked, because we're doing some journey mapping, what would they have liked to have seen or learned in order to I guess, convince them or kind of help them better decide around this, whether this is the organisation that they want to be part of. Every single one said, I want to see more of what it's like, the real life inside of. Or they, actually, a good 4 or 5 would have said at least, I want to know what a day in the life of a registered nurse or these carers is like. And I want to know how it is different in each organisation. And it was unprompted. Every one of them said that.
Yeah.
So.
Amazing. I'm really pleased to hear that, and it makes sense. It's like the try before you buy. I can't believe I just said that, but it is, right? It's the equivalent of try before you buy. Do you think we've just coined something different there, Brie? Anyway, if we look at the career site traffic plan, and if we look at the top 5 real KPIs, to highlighting the importance of setting career site traffic KPIs so you can get your stakeholders on the same page. This is the bit I think will be super useful for a lot of people that we've actually put together. This is the piece I was talking about with Brie and I on soda and coffee, and probably I think some lollies were involved.
Yeah, the afternoon lollies come out.
We put together a really
wine. How did we not get to wine?
I think we might have done later. So sorry when you get to the very last KPI. If it's off. No, I'm joking.
It's 500 something, isn't it?
Oh my God, sorry. We've losing my train of thought. It's just what happens with Brie and I. No, it's quite okay. So there's a real sort of detailed strategy guide for each of these KPIs based on the months of the research, the polls, and the data collection. And you can really have a look through it and like take from it what you need to. So many of the top 5 KPIs are really interrelated, as we were talking about earlier. So increasing page visibility can potentially increase traffic volume. So when you are choosing your KPIs, think about what else could be affected by setting these goals. And that's what you were talking about earlier, Brie, about putting up your hand up and saying, actually, I'm going to take this strategic KPI because actually everything sits underneath it. A really good example of this is maintaining 40 to 50% or less bounce rate, right, as a KPI. If the bounce rate is higher, it could impact the other metrics negatively. And then conversely, achieving other KPIs might help in reducing the bounce rate. For instance, if the content is engaging, visitors might spend more time on the site, reducing the bounce rate. So if we then move to increasing talent brand KPIs, and I've kind of skipped to this one because I think Brie did such an eloquent job of kind of the career site piece. This is a really big one. When I saw this as a KPI, I'm like, oh my gosh. And actually, I'm going to publicly ask if you want to do an entire session on talent brand KPIs with me next, Brie, because I think this is so valuable to people. So some of the key stats you'll find in here, but super important that candidates are 40% more likely to apply if they're familiar with a brand. 92% of people will consider changing jobs for a company with an excellent brand. And we're not talking about consumer or corporate brand here. And a strong talent brand can reduce the costs per hire by as much as 50%. We've also all got the sources for all these stats for you. And then near and dear to our heart, beyond hiring, a strong employer brand can lead to increased productivity and retention. Happy employees are 1.5 more likely to say they always want to give their best, and investing in your employer brand can also reduce turnover by 28%. So when you start looking at the full talent journey and what you're trying to impact, and telling your organization or working with the organization, look at the key stakeholders along that journey to see that who could impact the various points there. So, Brie, as the expert here, what would you say is the top advice that you would give to somebody who's looking to improve their talent brand?
Keep asking me these top advice questions. Top advice.
I can take them. I'm trying to share the love.
Top advice.
You are the expert.
Look, top advice. Look, this is not going to be surprising or new to anybody on this call, but I think in order to build your talent brand, you need to, I feel, first define your employee value proposition and that employer brand positioning of how you want to be seen and known in market. Like, you need to do this up front. I think it's about uncovering and defining the unique promise that you're going to provide employees in return for their contribution. I think, but it's not the tagline. It's not that side. That's important. That is definitely important for when you're out there in market campaigning. It needs to be something memorable. But I think it's really digging deep to really understand your critical audiences, understanding truly what is important to them, and ensuring that your EVP highlights the attributes that are going to have the greatest impact on attracting and retaining that right talent and the desired competitive positioning for each. So, for example, my aged care scenario today, we keep hearing why they want to work in an organization is they want to make a difference. I'm like, yeah, of course. These people, they are obviously intrinsically motivated. They're amazing people who care and want to make a difference for people by helping them in that way. But I'm like, but as a nurse, in any organization, you're going to make a difference. So what? So what's unique? So how do we uncover what that means within your organization, for example? I think you can't be everything to everyone. And I think I've seen so long these all-encompassing EVPs that are trying to appeal to every single talent segment within an organization, and trying to be catch-all for everyone. It's about really narrowing in, being clear on who you are, who you need within your organization to make sure you're appealing to the right people who are going to thrive in the company.
I had this conversation just last week, Brie, with a bunch of people, and I used used aged care, but I used innovation as an example. Like, people saying, innovative, innovation, everyone's got innovation as an EVP. We need to find something different. And my view is that actually you don't find something different. You can't just find something. If innovation is part of your organizational DNA, you need to find people that are part of that journey and want to help you deliver innovative solutions and results, then it's okay that innovation is one of them. But to your point, it's like, what is unique? What does innovation mean to you as an organization? And then to those people within the different talent segment. So I get the fears. Don't find an EVP. It's got to be real. It's got to be genuine. And if innovation is it, that's fine. But tell their stories. And actually, as you said, I think you used the expression dig deep, Brie. Use that as an example to find out what it means uniquely to you and in those different functions and talent segments.
Yeah. And we're in this situation where it's like, okay, even at a nurse level, we can build out how it comes to life, make a difference comes to life, or what our attribute we were kind of digging into. What does that mean for a nurse? But it's actually taking it to that next level again. And the personas or profiles within that, it's like, okay, early careers or those who are just graduating, what does that mean to them? And what's a differentiator to those who are at that point who have the other options? Well, what is it what is the differentiator?
Exactly.
Why would you work there? Why would you leave a hospital to work in an aged care facility? What is the pitch to them? What about people who are working in aged care? What is the pitch to them? And it's really going those levels down to be really, that's how we need to get truly differentiated. So I think then, so kind of like think about it, if we're really clear around what our offer is and who that's going to appeal to, then it helps us be really smart around how we go to market, where we go to market, what we say to the right people to convince and convert, to build a reputation and a strong talent brand with the right people. So to me, that's how we're building a strong, I guess, a talent brand there. But it's not just about the traction. It's obviously companies with a strong EVP increase their new hire commitment by almost 30% as well. So I think it's about, I keep harping on about, like, companies kind of don't want to repel people. It's important, right? Because the wrong people won't stick around.
Totally.
We can't afford to be getting it wrong. So
self-selection, in or out, that's okay.
So let's do it before, like right before they've gone through a journey and lost 6 months worth of all the effort and time and cost. And so I think what is interesting, I think, in this study here around, I think, looking at how people, whether they've recently updated their EVP, I think among even the top employer branding and talent acquisition leaders that have been polled around the world here, there's a considerable number who are desperately want to and perhaps need to update their EVP. It hasn't been done for quite some time. So even in leading organizations, that's still the case, obviously, despite the desire to do it, obviously for different reasons, we're not investing there.
Yeah, agreed.
What is your top recommendation?
Oh, no, you're throwing it. Oh, I see. I'm going to make you do tequila shots another time for that one. I think for me, no surprise for me, empowering employees to be guardians of your brand is my top recommendation. I mean, If I'm allowed to mention the L word, years of LinkedIn where we saw the success here. So, and working with organizations and what this looks like. And even now, really working through that. It's with a lot of our customers, developing an employee ambassador program or advocacy program, whatever you want to call it, to support employees and sharing their experience on social and personal networks, going into exactly what you just said about how you get nurses to go out there, or people in innovation, help them create the posts that, as I've said before, I think we've got stats here saying 10 times more engaging than corporate branded posts. It reaches like-minded people. For me, a good advocacy program, that pushed across a diverse range of channels as well. I know I mentioned the L word earlier, but diverse internal as well as external is really, how they're kind of evergreen and appear everywhere and get in, front of the right talent. And we're working with an amazing organization. I'm hoping they're listening, but oh my gosh, I look at I think they've got 10 separate employee advocacy programs, different talent segments, and we're helping them sort of reach new markets, enable them in local markets. I mean, I feel like finally the time of enabling people to tell their story in a thoughtful way that's easy. The symbiotic relationship is number one right now. So, yeah. And before you ask me another question, we, I think, are going to be moving to the final KPI. Can you see I don't trust you, Brie? I can see your face. So we're going to jump to, nice segue, into employee content, my absolute favourite conversation. I've just spent a week in Amsterdam talking about it and listening to some amazing organisations such as Kaufland doing a whole employee content campaign around diversity. Like, if you haven't seen it, have a look at it. Why is it so important? Kaufland. I'll share it afterwards.
I'll write it
down. Really amazing stuff, Aidan, on diversity. Really, really strong, really good. So why is employee content important? 3 times more credible than the CEOs regarding companies' working environment. Like, super important. Like, it's also 70% more trusted than any other source, and you can increase your brand reach by a staggering 561%. And remember, guys, I've always said we have links to all these sources. I think for me, employee content covers a wide range of these KPIs, from increasing content volume in general, but not content volume for content volume's sake. Fit for purpose, why you're trying to increase content volume, encouraging more content distribution, telling a specific story to attract certain talent. We talked about career site traffic already. It's no wonder that employee content ranks so highly amongst our polled leaders. We also know that 85% of active job seekers find their next job opening through social media. So increasing the amount of employee content increases the chance of the right talent finding you, referral programs. I could go on and on, but I'm getting a ping in the background not to go on and on. So, Brie, what question am I going to ask you now? What is your advice to someone who's looking to improve their employee content?
This is a tough one, and actually one that I started on a journey, and how I met the Martech, over 10, I don't know how many years ago now. You guys have been around.
5.
5, okay.
You just aged yourself 5 years unnecessarily.
Look, I know. I've been trying to solve this for it would have been like at least 12 years ago. How do you do employee content at scale, right? And I've learned all the lessons as to how not to do it, or probably what are the biggest challenges, right, in doing it. I think, to me, you mentioned before about increasing the sheer volume of traffic. I think, to me, it's about increasing the volume of quality traffic to your site. Yes. I think that's a big one. You can have so many visitors, you can have so many applications, but I remember at a point where I was at, and the head of TA we had to have a serious conversation, because the problem was I was driving too many job applications, and that was causing an issue for the team. Right?
That's a whole other story.
But then that was also then an issue for them, obviously, because they were a very customer-focused organisation. They're obviously not a great
Candidate
experience.
experience, yeah.
So it's then really thinking about, well, how do we obviously have the right sort of impact? So I think to me, it's about, I guess the best way of doing it is leveraging your influencer army. So thinking about how you're obviously using your current employees, how are you leveraging their credibility? Obviously, when you've got some stronger, well-known people in markets, how do you leveraging their reach into those right communities and audiences, and having them share their stories and their views in order to drive organic traffic to your site. Obviously, there's ways of driving traffic to your site, which is more paid, but this is obviously a much more organic, incredible approach, I think, of getting the right people there. But I think of the lessons, and gosh, Raj and I did a webinar, it was a 5-part series, a webinar years back now, and we really broke down the kind of what are those challenges and how do you start solving for them. But I think the really big one is around how do you make it easier for your people to create content. I think that is essentially the biggest problem. There is a lot of people, a lot of great advocates in the organization, and a lot of people are engaged and they want to help. But it's just the how. And even I know I was working with you guys for years, and Brie, can you write an article on this? I'm like, yes, I'd love to. I'll get to it. And it's always at the end of that to-do list, right? So it's how do you make it easier for your people to, when they're busy, to help generate content when it's not their full-time day job, right? So developing templates, developing processes, developing what you can to really simplify that content ideation and that generation for your employees is really important. And since carrying on about chucking out your stats, I've got some stats for you here too, Elle. Now, there's the source. I can't remember who it is now. I think it was researched by Lucid Press. I think it was. I think using content templates helped the data they've got shows how it really significantly reduced the time to produce content in 56% of businesses that were using templates. It helped create a more consistent branding across all the platforms, obviously, and it would actually help organizations increase their revenue by up to 23%. So thinking about how you're getting people to use content to generate content is obviously not having just impact from a talent perspective. It's actually obviously from an organization revenue as well. It caused a more proactive approach to content generation in 65% of companies, which is awesome. Obviously reducing costs as well. So it reduced a lot of companies' content production costs by up to 27%. And I think what was cool is that it encouraged 28% more feedback on employee content from their peers and supervisors. So obviously companies can be posting out there a lot. You don't get it's pretty hard to get some engagement and comments happening on your content. But if it is actually employee generated, you tend to do, obviously it increases the amount of comments you'll get from your peers, from leaders in organizations who are engaging that content as well. And then the fabulous Chelsea in the background here is pinging me up saying that those stats are actually from the Content Marketing Institute. So thank you for that, Chelsea.
Thank you, Chelsea. What would we do without Chelsea? By the way, talking of unsung heroes, for those who don't know, Chelsea West is absolutely one of our unsung heroes.
What would you say, Elle?
Did you see I was trying to move on really quickly then? We're tailing towards the end here. Okay. My top recommendation, tailored content creation. Articles, videos, podcasts that resonate with the challenges and interests of your hard-to-hire talent. That's my top recommendation. And I mentioned the L word earlier, but you spent there, obviously part of the MarTech now, just overseeing content for content's sake. And I think we saw a bit of that last week as well. It's not just, as you've just said. So the more focused and personalized you are, we have all the data that tells us the better your reach, engagement, and conversion would be. So that's kind of like, that's my top recommendation, tailored. I mentioned earlier day in the life. I am somewhat rude about bring your pets to work day, and that's only because my pets work with me every day because I work mostly remotely. Maybe I should start doing it. But they are, as you said, talking about the piece around the nurses. Candidates are really actively searching about the reality of working at companies. And I think 57% of candidates reported that companies didn't share content like key day in the life information on their career sites. And I have no idea why You wouldn't. Like, as I said, try before you buy. We're going to do something with this try before you buy, Brie, because I think that's kind of, really what it is.
Yes.
So, look,
Can I
I
just jump
hope.
in and say the image, obviously Chelsea here is scrolling, and obviously with you guys can see slides as I'm trying to read and look quickly. I just want to reiterate, this is the guide. What are you calling the Notion pages?
So when you go into the guide, there's links in each of these KPIs to these Notion pages that you and I put together. So thank you, Chelsea. So if we look at this number 3, for example, employee content strategy, you can literally go into our Notion page, you can copy it, you can download it. There's links to the stats, the data, the sources, some of the strategy we put together. Repurpose it, reuse it. It's all yours.
It's awesome. Like, I'm watching a scroll and there's so much in there.
Well, we dumped we dumped stuff in there. We put a lot of stuff in there, and then back to Chelsea again. I'm
She's made it look
embarrassing her
amazing
here.
and added a lot
She
more,
made
which is really cool.
She made it look really amazing. So, we want to be super valuable. Like, Brie, thank you so much for, helping us put all this together. And I'm sure everybody listening is, really grateful, and thank you. We had fun doing this. We enjoyed it. But, also really appreciate your time. Now, talking of time, we are, I think, going to open up 2 questions now. We've got sort of 10 minutes left. So if you have any, please ping them in and ask us if it's either of us or Brie or I. We'd be happy to answer them. Whoa, okay. Oh, we've got a lot of these going. Oh, thank you. There's some lovely comments from people. We're just trying to. Sorry, hello, Chelsea. Thank you.
Hello. Sorry, I thought I'd jump on. So we haven't had too many questions yet, but what I wanted to ask is sort of looking at all this data, I mean, these amazing resource guides you've put together, what would you sort of predict is next? Or looking at those last 8 months, you mentioned employee retention is super high as a priority, but where do you think it might go for the rest of the year from here? Just to put you both on the spot.
You just come from World Employer Brand Day.
Yes.
Was there talk of that, Elle?
Do you know what? I think there, and also just from my experience over the last few years, I think the question is what's the future, right? Was it about was the question around attraction versus retention?
Or was it more about where is the focus? Is it on?
Yeah, exactly. So I think the reason I'm pointing is the focus of the 2, and this is why I'm super excited. Like, genuinely, I think more and more people they're looking at skills, they're looking at upskilling, and actually there was genuine sessions and conversations on looking at the employees people do have, looking at what they can upskill. Back to your comment right at the beginning, Brie, about buy, build, borrow, bot. I think finally a lot of organizations maybe not using that terminology, but are actually saying, who can we upskill within our organization? How do we also retain people? Look at career pathing. However, having said that, with a lot of organizations, there's limitations on what they can do in terms of upskilling. So there is still a huge strategic focus on attracting new talent, new skills. In the UK as well, there's a lot of conversation about apprenticeships. So that's sort of 16 to 18-year-olds. We've seen trends of, people not needing degrees now. I know that's been around in the UK. It's coming around in Australia. I'm not so sure about the US. So I think there is not only bringing in new age, trying to lower the age gaps, bringing in new skills, but also then saying, well, who within an organization can we actually upskill and, retain that really good talent, retain our IP?
Absolutely. I'm seeing that as well, around organizations thinking about how are they creating the skills. I think it's then thinking differently about different, obviously there's been traditional graduate programs within organizations, but different types of programs, not focused just on your university leavers. Thinking about how you can bring people in with lower level qualifications and then building programs to be taking them and get them further qualifications, and the organization's obviously funding a lot of that as well. But I know there's definitely a lot of focus on the retention side. Obviously, we've seen a lot of movement. Organizations, I think, definitely slowing. There's, if not going backwards, a lot of cutting of people in organizations I'm talking to as well. So there's definitely a focus on thinking about, well, obviously recruitment volumes are slowing. Where can we spend our efforts and time? And it's like, well, if we're on hiring freezes, we can't be hiring new people. So we need to actually put our efforts into retaining the ones we've got, because essentially we're going to be asking them to do more with less. So when they've got a whole bunch of their peers leaving, thinking about that experience of those who are sticking around, and how we can ensure they're having, I guess, positive ones as well. So I think that the focus on the internal has been a big one too, I'm seeing.
And then also, we look at employer brand. While we're just waiting for any last questions, I have also seen a shift as well in talent acquisition. More and more, the capability is around internal, is about retention. And I think TA are looking internally as well as externally, which I think they've done in a lot of organizations, but it's becoming more formalized now. So I think even those organizations, if you think you're not so forward thinking and maybe report directly into TA, you're going to see a shift. Whereas as EB practitioners, you're partnering hand in hand with TA to actually look both internally as well as externally. And I think, from my perspective, working with people across the globe, that's one of the big sort of future shifts I have seen.
Yeah. Actually, in saying that, it's then even as we're very exploring, not only thinking about how we're building talent pools and obviously the CRMs and that you nurture for the external prospects, it's actually then a big conversation around, well, how do we apply this to our internal workforce? Yeah. So thinking about those, how we then not only just relying on them, going to the intranet to look at what open jobs they are, thinking about how we can be putting those who are in a pool, who are ready for a move, how are we thinking about nurturing them in their career and deliberately putting opportunities in front of them, which has obviously never been a huge focus before, but it definitely is becoming more of a focus.
Thank you, Dawn. I didn't know you were there. Lovely to see you. Yeah, great. Good question. Smaller organizations. Brie, do you want to take that one?
I think probably I would be focusing on, and it seems an obvious one, it is that website. I think we did speak about it before. I think for me, that is the center of everything. Yeah. So making sure you've actually got that working effectively for you. So having the content on there that's selling your organization, positioning it in the right way, it's working there for you. It's like an extension of your TA team, right? There's no point having people out there. There's no point, as I was saying to people, they want to run social media campaigns, they want to getting some people posting. I'm like, but where's it directing to? It's all directing back to your site. And if your site is not equipped to convince and convert, all that is pointless. So don't waste your efforts in driving people to a site that's not going to do its job in getting you any benefit. So I'd be first focusing on creating a good site, and then thinking about how you're activating your people to be the ones out there,
yes,
as acting like a talent magnet. So it's not as reliant on your TA team to be the ones out there continually selling.
You can't boil the ocean. You can't do everything yourself, and that applies to everybody. So I think, Brie, you're quite right. Like career site, absolutely, because that's where you can lose people before they apply to jobs. And then advocacy, absolutely help and enable your people, small organizations, big organizations, whatever frameworks you have, to hand, help your people, help you spread the good word. To remember networks, like Brie, can we admit we're pretty much like besties now, but we started professionally, working together. That's what happens though. You create groups and networks of people that you've worked with. So help your people do that. I think those are the two most important things for smaller organizations or people without resources. Definitely. You're welcome, everyone, by the way, for saying thank you. And absolutely, we will. If you follow the Martech and or probably both the Martech and Employer Brand Wagon, we'll always have posts there for future, for past and future webinars. Sorry, I was just reading your comment there. So yes, please do follow us on LinkedIn, and everything will be there. I think I think we've had kind of the questions. We're absolutely at time. Brie, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've missed doing this. I think I'm going to make you do this more. I'm not sure if you actually committed to doing the one on talent brand with me, but I'm openly outing you and committing you here. I think we can do some more in here, but it's been, wonderful connecting. And there was one last comment here that I missed to say, was that is talent brand here about employee advocacy? For me, employee advocacy fits into talent brand. I think they're absolutely hand in hand. And the phrase I can sort of end that we always use is, your people are always going to be talking about you, whether you like it or not, whether the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is the one. Thank you so much. They're always going to be talking about you. And my view is, you can't control, and you shouldn't control what they say. You should never try to do that. But what you can do is help them influence it and use that in a more strategic way. But you can't do that unless you've got the core, like your culture, programs, initiatives in place that support that advocacy. So they, programs, initiatives, advocacy, I think all file under talent brand. But again, I think we could do a whole session on that. And I think that's super important.
Yeah. I think it's about how you obviously equipping your people to better advocate for your organization. So therefore their impact, their word of mouth builds a stronger talent brand for your organization. Talent brand, employer brand, interchangeable. LinkedIn changed everything by introducing the term talent brand. Employer brand.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for, joining us, and been a pleasure. Look forward to doing it again soon. And don't forget, we will send the guide out. You'll all have it. The Notion pages. Go for your life. Cheers,
Thanks
guys. Take care. Cheers, Brie.
Bye.
Bye.